people can apply. And what that gets you is it gets your application in front of the vetting team. Top secret vetting team. They're cloaked and they sit in a dark room and they look at applications. And so we ask you to submit adventure resumes. And what does that mean? What's an adventure resume? Basically, you're trying to convince us that you have what it takes to not get dead.
From beautiful Port Townsend, Washington, a Victorian seaport on the Salish Sea, and recorded aboard the motor vessel Traveler, it's the Boat Geeks with Darren and Daeron.
All right, we are the Boat Geeks. I am your host, Darren.
And I'm your other host, Darren.
And we are very excited today. We have a special guest, Jesse Wiegel, race boss for Race to Alaska with the Northwest Maritime Center. Jesse, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks so much. It's really good to be here on a foggy day in Port Ludlow.
Yeah, absolutely. It's beautiful. Any day at the marina is a beautiful day for Darren and I, for sure. So I said you're the race boss for Race to Alaska, but you do some other things at the Northwest Maritime Center.
Yeah, I sure do. All of us at the Northwest Maritime Center wear lots of hats. Mm-hmm. Most of mine say boss on them somehow. So I'm the race boss for Race to Alaska. I am also the race boss for 7048, which is our paddling event. And I am the cruise boss for Salish 100, which is our week-long summer camp for adults, I kind of think of it. But it's a big, slow-speed sailing cruise.
Awesome.
And sometimes they call me in to drive our ferry that we recently
produced. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Admiral
I've
Jack
seen it out there.
Is our program boat. Sometimes I get to go remember how to drive a boat.
Excellent. Well, we, as the Boat Geeks, we love boats, but we love to find out from our guests, how do you love boats? How did you get introduced to the sailing lifestyle or boats? We heard you have an interesting story. So
yeah, I have a little kind of non sequitur story. Maybe I was living in Bellingham doing nothing with myself, and sitting at a bar one day, and this guy wanted to throw darts with me. Skip ahead, skip ahead, skip ahead. He hired me to go work up at the at North Cascades Institute, which is a educational institute up in the mountains. Has nothing to do with water. I'll get there. I had no credentials. I hadn't gone to college, nothing. This guy just wanted to hire me for some reason. And up there, I wound up working with a graduate student named Megan, who later on became the educational director for Sound Experience that runs the schooner Adventurous.
Wow.
Skip ahead, skip ahead. I wound up living in Port Townsend. Adventurous is based out of Port Townsend. Mm-hmm. I wound up working on Adventurous. I started there as an intern, knowing nothing, couldn't tie a bowline. And after the first summer, I could sail better than my brother, at least, who was liveaboard. No one ever taught him how. So I wound up really falling in love with that community and sailing schooners, which I then wound up doing for a bunch of years. I moved up from being just a little piddly intern to being a deckhand, to being the relief cook, to being the relief engineer, getting my own license and moving up into the mate role. And throughout that time, I was off working on other boats on the East Coast, the West Coast, Pride of Baltimore too, and the Picton Castle out of Lunenburg.
Wow.
All sorts of things. And and I kind of did that for about 10 years. And as much as we all love sleeping on a boat bunk, I also daydreamed a lot about having my own bed at some point,
sure,
and maybe having a garden.
Yeah.
So
landlubber.
Moved ashore just before COVID into Maryland, where I worked as the fleet captain for the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum.
Oh,
wow.
That's
a cool place.
Before COVID shut us down. It's a great museum, really great museum. And COVID shut us down, laid me off, and I wound up back in Port Townsend, where it just so happens that my very first captain on Adventurous, Daniel Evans, the race boss for Race to Alaska, we now call him the race boss emeritus, offered me a job as the race marshal. And then he jumped ship, and I got a battlefield promotion.
He wanted to be a high school teacher.
I guess he did. He wanted to spend time with his daughter, and that was a pretty good way to go.
Yeah, that's true.
That is a very unique and awesome story for being introduced to the sailing lifestyle. Did you, at any point during this process, recognize that, okay, boats are going to be a big part of my future? Did it feel like you found something you loved? Or was it just you were along for the ride and that's where it took you?
Well, I think what I found in sailing was kind of twofold. One was One was the boats, obviously. I think if you're boat geeks and you love sailing, and if your listeners are boat geeks and they love sailing, you know that feeling of a sheet in one hand and a tiller in the other hand, and you become some kind of conduit for universal energy.
I love that.
So when I started feeling that, especially when I'm at the helm of a big schooner, I mean, it's just a kind of a bigger magnitude there.
I don't know the feeling, but I can imagine.
It's the same feeling. It's just quite a bit more.
Exponentially.
Actually, in some ways it's more, in some ways it's less, because
the tactile response of a big wheel on a tall ship isn't the same as a tiller on a laser.
But when you're working with main sheets that take 9 people to haul in. But then the other thing that I realized later on, and this might actually sound really, some people might hate me for saying something like this, but I actually started to realize that the boats didn't matter quite as much to me, the boats themselves.
Sure.
It was all of these people that I was working with, the community of adventurous and the community of people that seemed to gather around boats. That's really what I realized that I was drawn to.
Yes.
And that's why it was okay for me to step off the water as much as I have now, because at the Maritime Center, I get to surround myself with incredible people every day, and still occasionally get to go sailing.
We feel very much the same way. The boating community, especially, like, I really only am familiar with the boating community in the Port Townsend area, the greater Port Townsend area. And people are just awesome. They're happy and love boats. And it's just a great feeling being around that community.
Yes.
And obviously Port Townsend in particular. The Race to Alaska. All right. This is a project of the Northwest Maritime Center. You can find out more about it at R2AK.com. It is a 750-mile cold water race.
Brr, that's cold water.
No motor, no support, all the way to Alaska from Port Townsend, Washington.
Can I just add in there, no motor means you can't even have it on your boat.
Right.
That's an important piece to understand.
Like as a backup or,
gone.
As support. And it's been featured in Sail Magazine, Sailing World, Yachting World,
CNN, New York Times,
the heavy hitters,
CTV in Canada, all that good stuff.
It is a big deal. It's made the media all over the country, all over the world. And documentary in 2020 that was at all kinds of film festivals. You can watch that on Apple TV, Amazon, and YouTube. I would totally recommend it. At least go watch the trailer, which I think will hook you into watching it anyway. It's riveting.
The race to Alaska is truly daring.
Am I stupid? Is this dangerous?
You know you're always on the edge of disaster.
You just have constant waves splashing in your face, and you're just like, why am I doing this?
When I first heard about the R2AK, I thought, sounds like a good way to die.
It's a bit of an anarchist race. I like that.
The rules of the race are intentionally as simple as possible. There's a starting line in Port Townsend. There's a finish line in Ketchikan. There's $10,000 for a first prize. There's a set of steak knives for a second prize. And the only rule is that your boat can't have a motor on board.
Things are just boring when they're easy. It's got to be the only race that I know of where the winner is probably the least interesting thing about the race.
Got a first-class crew, very athletic and fit.
I'm in it because it's fun.
We're cozy. This is super cozy in here.
We do listen to a lot of reggae, and we do try and keep it positive.
This is like sending a guy up into space for the first time. You don't know what to expect.
This is ridiculous, but awesome racing.
There are any number of things that can go wrong.
Losing someone overboard.
Wind against current.
Short, steep seas.
Huge whirlpools, they'll just kind of open up.
There's a lot of bears.
And the water being cold.
I just look out and see icy death, so how do I avoid icy death?
It's hours upon hours of boredom and beauty with moments of terror and horror.
Last night we got rocked.
There were decisions made that were flat out dangerous and irresponsible.
I only search for live people. I don't search for bodies.
This race is about that inner challenge.
It's the fear of the unknown. It's just you. Can you do it?
You are racing against your brain, yourself.
I wanted to see what I was capable of.
Look at this beautiful evening.
We are here next to a waterfall.
Sometimes you just have to keep grinding forward.
There's no roads to confine you. You just go.
It's not just a race. This is an opportunity to do that thing and be that person that you always wanted to be.
There was another documentary made before that. It was a university-funded documentary called Rite of Passage, a Race to Alaska documentary. This followed one boat in particular, I think. I only watched the beginning of that. I only had time.
Yeah, there's actually the one Race to Alaska documentary that you first talked about that's on all of the streaming platforms.
Yes.
That was produced by the Race to Alaska film boss, who was the guy in charge of our media production for the first 6 years of the race. And a side project of his was to create the full documentary. That's Zach Carver,
Wow,
really wonderful filmmaker.
Well done.
The other ones, though, that's all endeavors of the teams themselves, and they seem to come out every year. In fact, just maybe a month ago, a team from last year called Dog Smile Adventures put out a documentary called Success, which is great. Because they didn't make it, and they still found it to be a success.
Yeah, that's awesome. There is a lot of just amazing content out there created by the teams themselves and the official content. I would recommend for any of our viewers to go check it out. It really immerses you in the drama and the excitement of the event. And I think, speaking of that,
a lot of people are still unfamiliar with the race around the country. Even though it's known internationally. But to give folks just a real quick description so you get an idea of what we're going to be talking about. This, I believe, was written by Jake Beatty, who is a fabulous writer, has a great sense of humor. And this will give you an idea of what we're talking about. The Race to Alaska isn't for everyone. It's like the Iditarod on a boat with the chance of drowning, being run down by a freighter, or eaten by a grizzly bear. There are squalls, killer whales, tidal currents that run upwards of 20 miles an hour, and some of the most beautiful scenery on Earth. It is the hardest kind of simplicity. You, a boat, a starting gun. $10,000 if you finish first. A set of steak knives if you're second. Cathartic elation if you can simply complete the course. R2AK is a self-supported race with no supply drops and no safety net. Any boat without an engine can enter. If this sounds like your brand of whiskey, R2AK Race to Alaska is for you. Wow. Okay, let's talk about this.
Such a perfect description, and I think encapsulates the potential for anything to happen, which I hope we hear some interesting stories from you of things that have happened over the years.
Things happen, yeah.
Another description from the documentary, actually, one of the teams, I believe, described it as, it's hours upon hours of boredom and beauty with moments of terror and horror. I just find that hilarious. I think that can be applied to, we were talking about that earlier, to any sort of
cruising
serious
around the world,
cruising or sailing.
As long as we're doing quotes, one quote that I've got pinned to the wall in my office is from a racer a couple years ago, Doug Smith, Team Darkstar. He said, "Racing to Alaska is the dumbest thing anybody could do. It's like bicycling through the Louvre."
The quotes are great.
Classic.
Obviously, it's a very unique experience, and it takes a very unique type of person or team to be able to do this. Yeah. Now, this started in 2015, the first race. We heard there's a very interesting story to how the race came into being.
There's like an urban myth that it was Jake Beatty, Daniel Evans, the original race boss, and a bar and a napkin.
How many great ideas start with a napkin?
Only the best.
Star Wars and
what is your recollection?
My
of how
recollection. Well, I wasn't there, so I could just make some stuff up right now. I mean, as race boss, half of my job is just making stuff up.
Sure.
But the story that I do here is Jake was During one of the wooden boat festivals back in 2013, 14, somewhere in there, was sitting around with a bunch of old Outward Bound instructors. There's a nugget for the story for all you. Outward Bound instructors. If you don't know what Outward Bound is, look it up. It's an amazing organization. I worked for them as well, so it's very deep in the DNA of Race to Alaska. Daniel and Jake were both sailing instructors for Outward Bound, as was I. So that organization really pushes resilience, self-reliance, and there just wasn't anything in our world here that really fit the bill for that type of experience that Jake saw. So he decided to create something. It's kind of the next level after Outward Bound, almost, where you really do go out on your
next
own.
2 or 3 levels.
Next 2 or 3 levels. Yeah. So where else can you go out and really put yourself in that level of danger in an organized event? It's not very common in the world that you're even allowed to do something that is risky.
True.
And we think that's part of the human experience, that if you want to do something that is kind of above and beyond for that reward at the other end, whether that's steak knives or pride in yourself.
Just finishing, yeah.
Yeah, then you should be able to do it. So that's why Jake created it.
Can you describe the actual course? And
there's a lot of water on it, first of all.
Good point.
Cold water.
Cold water, yeah. So the course is in 2 sections. The first section is called the Proving Ground, from Port Townsend to Victoria across the Strait of Juan de Fuca. And it's no joke. It is a big piece of water. If you've ever been on it, you know that sometimes you can luck out and it's flat glass, like it was last year. Actually, the Proving Ground really disappointed us, didn't do its job last year. But the previous year, it really pulled out the guns. So in 2022, we had this wind against tide event.
Oh my gosh.
That was massive. We
Big
got these
square,
massive tide
tall
rips.
waves, yeah.
Right out by Point Wilson, we had our first capsize with, I think, 23 minutes into the race. Katie Stewart capsized her Angus Row cruiser, and she was the first casualty of the race. Not casualty that she didn't make it back, but casualty that she didn't get to go on. So that Proving Ground is a real deal.
It's legit.
And it's a filter.
Yeah.
It's what we use while there is still a pretty hefty safety net of first response agencies and our own safety boats before we send them out into the wild unknown. So they have to make it across the Victoria within 36 hours without getting rescued, or they're disqualified.
Sure.
And after a couple of days of licking their wounds and putting stuff back together with Gorilla Glue, they set back out again after a Le Mans start, and they go the rest of the 700 plus miles up to Ketchikan. And so along the way, they're encountering, down in the southern end, they're still encountering a lot of vessel traffic. They're encountering tide rips down here. They're encountering weather, and getting up to Seymour Narrows, the most kind of famous spot on the course where, you know, several times a day that tide switch comes and the current's running 14, 15 knots through there, creating these giant whirlpools. Our copy actually says 40-foot whirlpools. And when I was up there a couple years ago, I think it was more like 70 feet.
Jeez.
I was shocked because it was the first time I'd personally seen it with my own eyes. And the center of some of those whirlpools is 6 feet down from the rest of the surface of the water.
There's a reason why it's recommended to only go through Seymour Narrows at slack tide.
Yeah.
There's a reason.
Not to mention all the debris from here to there.
Absolutely. It's a minefield out there. It takes boats out left and right, especially in 2022. There had been this massive 13-year event where there hadn't been as high a tide in 13 years, and it picked up every log in the inside passage and shoved it out in the middle of the Race to Alaska race course about 2 days before the race started.
The tidal exchanges, I mean, they can be immense.
Immense, yeah. 14 feet.
Yeah. Crazy.
And, so they're dealing with that all the way they go north. And once they get through Seymour Narrows, it's not like it gets any easier. They're now in Johnstone Strait, which we should probably talk more about, actually, in terms of what we're trying to scare people with. It is a heinous strip of water that just seems to reach out and grab all the wind in the area and pull it in.
And just funnel it right down this long, narrow strait. And for those of you that are unfamiliar with Johnstone Strait, watch some of the videos, watch the documentary, and some of the scenes with that nasty, oh my gosh, the water is just a cauldron. I mean, there was some helicopter footage.
Oh, sure.
Of boats with just a storm jib and bare poles just getting slammed. And I don't think a lot of people understand just how dangerous it can be on Johnstone Strait and being in a recreational vessel.
Yeah, no joke.
It's not a joke.
It's really, really not.
It's rough sailing, and you're somewhat miserable, if not completely miserable, right? Because you're freezing. Yeah. I mean, the vessels are, and we can get into this as well. I hope we do come back to some of these things we've mentioned. But the vessels, there's a huge variety. Sure. I mean, there's people going out in basically like paddle boards almost, all the way up to
not almost.
Yeah.
To
high-tech sailing vessels.
Absolutely.
And I would like to get into that soon. But now the course, which Darren brought up, has that course changed over the years? So this started in 2015. I think a very interesting note is that the fastest time was in 2016, which was just over 3 days and 20 hours by Team Mad Dog Racing, and that has not been beaten yet. It's
has not. That one's standing up, and I'm curious to see who's going to try to take that down.
Absolutely, that'd be quite an accomplishment, because what a trip. But now I did read something about the course changing, maybe the outside of Vancouver Island.
Yeah. So before COVID, there was an announcement made that the 2020 race was going to subtract Seymour Narrows as a required waypoint, which then made it possible for racers to take the outside of Vancouver Island. And of course, 2020 race didn't happen. 2021 race didn't happen. So in 2022, I think we called it the best bad idea 3 years running. And so we finally did get to run that race with the outside route, and 3 boats went out that way. And then last year, 2023, it was open again, but none of the boats took that route because the weather conditions weren't right for it. And so then this year we said, hey, you know what? We're going back classic. So we put back the Seymour Narrows waypoint. So that was interesting. We like to experiment. We like to change things sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes just for the reason of making people grumpy. You know, don't take this too seriously.
Yes.
Well, so we talk about Johnstone Strait, and after that, though.
Oh, after that, I mean, there's more. It's stacks on.
Ocean.
So you've got, once you get through Johnstone Strait, you're going by Port Hardy, Port McNeil, you're getting up to Cape Caution, and that is an incredibly exposed cape where you gotta time it right. You've got the Skeena outflow just north of that. Everything's starting to happen up there, and then there's island groups you got to go through until you get to the second waypoint, Bella Bella, and after that you can pretty much launch out in the direction of Haida Gwaii if that's what you want to do, or you can stay tight. You can take all sorts of different routes up that way, and you can go back and watch the trackers, and you can see people trying every which way to fool the weather gods into letting them go the fastest.
Sure.
You get up into Hecate, and every step of the way, there's just a new weather element going.
Something new to contend
and
with.
Maybe that element is that it's a calm. Last year we had Team Super Nautiloid. They left Bella Bella checkpoint, and they did not touch land again for 5.5 days.
Wow.
And they sat out there somewhere reaching toward Haida Gwaii, and they were actually at some points going so slow that the motion sensor on their tracker
showed them going backwards.
It was going them well. It didn't sense enough motion for the thing to stay on.
Yeah.
So they kept blinking out, and it was only when they started going a knot again that we could see them, and they were just out there for days. So you're either encountering giant seas, or maybe you're encountering no seas. But
it's wild.
You're committed at that point.
So you give every boat that enters the race a spot,
a tracker, GPS tracker.
Okay, and then on the website you post, and I think it goes out on social media all over the place as well. You can live track where everybody is, and it primarily maybe for friends and family. But as just an observer, I would imagine the website hits go through the roof when all those boats.
I mean, you might assume
out.
that it's just friends and family, but I think last year we had 36,000 individual viewers of the tracker.
Wow.
So if that's just friends and family for 31 teams,
these people have
those
huge
are some
families.
popular people.
Well, I read that the reason to give them the trackers was for you guys to track them, but also so their friends and family could. But
it's
then
twofold.
all the world wants to see where everybody is.
Yeah,
So,
and it really is all the world. We gotta love analytics, right? You can we can go in and see where people are watching from, and obviously North America, the Pacific Northwest, Vancouver Island, Vancouver itself. You know, those are the main spots. But we also somehow we've reached into France. We've reached into Great Britain.
Sailing crazy.
Australia
people.
loves Race to Alaska.
New Zealand, I would imagine, probably.
New Zealand, absolutely. This year, we have our first entry from Israel. He's going to be coming out here. You'll be excited to see the boat he's using.
Oh, yeah.
That is, you might say, is a questionable choice, but we commend him for it. So yeah, people are watching from all over the place.
This episode of the Boat Geeks is sponsored by The Boater's Guide, a free app for Pacific Northwest boaters. The Boater's Guide is adventure and information, right at your fingertips, right when you need it. Find your happy place with The Boater's Guide, a free download on your phone or tablet in the App Store and Google Play.
So you mentioned his boat is a questionable choice. You get a lot of entries from people that want to race, but there's an initial screening that happens, and if they don't have what it takes or their boat doesn't have, then they can't enter. So how do you guys deal with that?
That's a really good question. So people can apply, and what that gets you is it gets your application in front of the vetting team. Top secret vetting team. They're cloaked and they sit in a dark room and they look at applications. And so we ask you to submit adventure resumes. And what does that mean? What's an adventure resume? Basically, you're trying to convince us that you have what it takes to not get dead.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
The right stuff.
We want you to go have an extreme adventure. We want you to go push yourself. But we also don't want to be your first rodeo.
Serious casualties.
Like that's not what we're here for. And so we'll support you in your in your dreams to do some crazy things. But you got to show us first that you have the experience to operate the vessel. You have the experience to encounter the conditions that you're going to encounter. Maybe you haven't encountered exactly these conditions, but we want to like be able to at least read between the lines to see like, okay, this person's got what it takes. And it's also really important that we see in there that these people can stop. Mm-hmm. Like if you are in Johnstone and there is a forecast that you've got, 30 knots coming at you for the next 3 days and you don't have what it takes, you got to be able to say,
got to have the wisdom to know when to stop.
And so when people put that in an application, it's a really good indication that they've got it. And anecdotal evidence is really strong. So if you're out there listening to this, just like gobbling up everything you can about Race to Alaska, and you are thinking about putting an application, listen to me now. We're serious.
Yeah.
Tell us the full story. Yeah. But also some of the vetting team wants it in bullet points. So let me put it out there. Don't write us these, long prosaic stories about how your grandfather taught you to sail on a lake. We want to know the nuts and bolts of what you can do.
So there may or may not be specific qualifications and experience that you're looking at, but there's a secret team that is making these decisions, which is great because obviously everybody wants a fun race and safety. I would love to know some of the boat ideas or what's been put forward that you haven't accepted because you just felt like it wasn't safe enough.
Accepted.
I mean, you're taking paddleboard, so like, what does it take for if the person has the sailing experience or the gumption to do it, and you feel like they're gonna make the right choices? Is there a vessel that would just make you say no?
Well, it's really a combination. There are certainly vessels that we would say no to one person and say yes to another.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So last year we had a racer apply. His name's Satchel Douglas, and Satchel, he raced Race to Alaska several years ago on a sailboat. And he has a really good background. We trust him. Yeah. He's a known entity.
Right.
He has completed it. We know that he's laid eyes on the entire course.
Right.
And he was applying for the Proving Ground last year on a foiling wingboard.
Oh my gosh!
Wow.
And which is like a dumb idea, Satchel. I don't know if you're listening, but like, what are you thinking? But at first, the vetting team said, "No, this is
of
crazy."
course.
But we worked with him. I talked with him a lot, and we had a lot of questions for him. How are you going to store your gear?
Yeah.
What are you going to do when there's no wind and you got to, like, can you propel yourself?
Right.
So there is an element there where we will work with people. Like,
Yeah.
I want everybody in the race.
Yeah.
Sure.
So if there is advice we can give or questions that can be answered that will get someone to the starting line, we'll do it. And so Satchel got a yes eventually. I told him he was off on the East Coast, and what we hadn't seen out of him at that point, we'd seen the cold water, we'd seen him do pretty long trips, but nothing like super exposed. And he was out, I think he was near Boston. So I called him up. I said, Satchel, I want you to go down to Rhode Island and put your little wing thing in the water over by the Block Island ferry. I want you to take a run out to Block Island and back. Just go hit that up. And he did. So I was like, all right. It's pretty good. Block Island's, the Long Island Sound there's not a joke either. So and actually that's a part of my job I really love. I get to be the first point of contact for all the racers and meet these incredible people. So boats that don't get in, there was a boat in 2020, boat that was going to try to go in 22, I think. It came to us in the application. We got CAD drawings for this boat that had 2 holes, 2 sails, but they were stepped laterally, 1 on each hull. And it was going to be up on 5 foils. Oh, wow. Which is a crazy idea. And it was twitchy. It was unproven.
Right.
Of course, it wasn't built.
Right.
But the person who was going to captain it was well known to us and has proven that they have what it takes to say no. And actually it was proven out because when that boat finally got in the water, the thing, there was no steerage.
Yeah.
They couldn't get it up on steps. So I was like, so he said, no, we're not doing this.
Yeah.
So,
I'm wondering, and I would imagine whether it's the vetting team or it's just the brain trust that, and we don't need to dwell on this, but the conversation that maybe you guys have had about what do we do if someone dies?
Which has not happened.
It's not happened. No.
Yeah. But
it's
potential.
We're not, we're all sitting here knocking on wood. It's a dangerous race.
Yes.
There's
very
potential
seriously,
for that.
yes.
Well, I mean, you can just fall off of a boat,
absolutely,
a pleasure craft in Lake Union and drown.
Or
hypothermia.
That
or
sort of thing
anything,
happens. Like Mackinac race. Someone falls off the boat and things happen. But when you're going up in places like that, there's also no north of Campbell River and Seymour Narrows. Your access to search and rescue drops off pretty considerably. So first stage, we really try to message to people what this really is. We want to make sure you know exactly what you're getting into. You have what it takes. We require everyone to have an EPIRB on board as well. You should. We also have to let you know, like, this is your choice.
Right.
This is absolutely your choice. Just like anything you do on your own vessel is your choice. This is your choice. And then we have that spot tracker that we're always watching. We do have media vessels out that are not there for the purpose of safety, but we are at least up to Campbell River. We maintain some level of presence on the water, but it hasn't happened yet. And so, you're right. There are discussions that we've had around what that would be. And you're right that maybe I won't talk more about it.
Okay. Moving on. How about a better?
Well, one thing that I'm super interested in, I love the idea of all these amazing sailors, adventurers, coming up with creative vessels or just pushing the envelope, thinking outside the box. And and technologies of great interest to me, sailing technology. So how has technology impacted the race since beginning, since 2015? And have you seen any trends with technology? Like, are people catching on to, this kind of boat material might be a little bit better or whatever? Are you seeing technology affect the race or come into play much?
Interesting. Well, because there's such a spread of vessel types, like you mentioned.
Can you give us a spread? What is
sure.
what from what to what are you?
So typically, the most impressive thing that anyone's ever done it on was a stand-up paddleboard.
Yeah, which is insane.
That
that
has been done one time, and actually last year we had another pretty great attempt at a stand-up paddleboard.
Those people
made it to Bella Coola.
Deserve recognition because I can't even. I would never get to the place, no matter how much training, to where I would feel comfortable doing that.
And from there, a fair number of people do it in kayaks. We last year had our first solo rowers do it. Two individuals finished in single rowboats. We've had before that a few double rowers, and then we have people in, just small, what you might consider like weekender sailboats.
Yeah.
You get Ranger 20s, things like that. And then you start moving up the line to all the boats you might expect.
In a race.
Your mid-size cruising boats.
Yeah.
And then you're all the way up to stuff like...
what's the biggest boat?
The biggest... I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull out exactly in length. But this last year we had, of course, Team We Break for Wales aboard Grey Wolf, the well-known Lyman Morse cold-molded monohull that sells here. And I think she's... someone out in Radio World is going to be shouting the
LOA of that
40 or so.
Yeah. We'll see it in our comments.
We also have like giant trimarans, like Dragon. So it's incredible.
You get the Farriers and the Corsairs.
Yeah, Corsairs.
A lot of those.
Literally anything that
I
floats.
will put a note in about Corsairs. We had 8 or 9 Corsairs enter the race last year.
Wow.
And we had 4 of them finish. So at the Blazer
Just
party
under
in
50%.
September, I presented the Best Broken Corsair Award. And I put a challenge out there to all the Corsair sailors and maybe even the manufacturers. Like, send us some more Corsairs that don't break, will you?
Yeah. Right.
That'd be great. We've already got a couple of them entered for this coming year.
Now, I remember a few years ago, and our memories with the pandemic make everything. It was a few years ago.
Yeah.
That Jake put out a challenge, I believe, to Larry Ellison, and he was bringing. Was it an open 60?
Yeah. Well, that was the dare.
Yeah, but
Race to Alaska is a dare.
The boat was coming up to take part in the race, and it broke down off the coast of Oregon.
Oh, well, that wasn't Larry Ellison.
Oh,
that was another team. But they, and again, this is a bit of my shortcoming as Race Boss 2.0.
Wow.
That I don't have all of the
first-hand
memory.
Yeah.
All the first-hand things.
We don't want to dwell on stuff that came before Jesse. Let's talk about now in the future.
But the Larry Ellison bit was Race to Alaska is a dare. It's a dare to everybody.
Well, there's all the side bets, right? But people are really just.
Oh, it's wonderful.
Yeah, I love the whole idea of that.
2 side
different
bets.
awards.
The Duckworks Supply is sponsoring the 20 and under award, which is
that's great.
$1,000 and a tactical spork.
Yeah.
Team Oracle, who are a much beloved duo.
You got to spell Oracle. So
OAR.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, not that Oracle.
Yeah.
Other Oracle, Janice Mason.
The
Ian
creative
Graham.
names, just the names of some of the teams are.
Yeah, well, they're putting up for the second year this year the Oracle Blister Prize, which is awarded $1,000 in Canadian loonies, and that goes to the first human-powered finisher to catch a cannon. It's I think we measured it. It was about 17 pounds of loonies.
Oh wow!
And so
Cool.
Ian and
That's
Janice say that
hilarious.
they're spending the year polishing each and every loony, getting ready.
That is so fun.
So you were talking though about technology.
Back to technology. I'm just curious. Like, are people going carbon fiber? Or how is it? Are you seeing any impact? Are you seeing trends, or is everybody still all over the place?
Everybody's all over the place. I think the place
The nature of
where
the race.
technology, where people try to, where people invest most of the energy and technology is on their alternative propulsion.
The engineering of their
propulsion, and that is
mounting a bicycle inside.
Yeah, and
it's crazy.
I think we're at the point in the race though that until something new comes along, it's been kind of well decided that a pedal drive I mean, you got that big muscle group in your legs. You can pedal a lot longer. You can row, but we still see people out there on some 30-foot monohull with a stand-up paddleboard paddle, which maybe they just didn't look too closely into what they're going to need.
Sure,
but it's how they put together these pedal systems is interesting, and we see a lot of that being repaired in Victoria.
I bet. Yeah,
it really tickled me last year that we had, I believe in 2014 or 2013, somewhere back in there, Bill Hardesty won the Rolex Yachtsman of the Year. So he's a world-class yachtsman. And he and his team Trace Eckes last year, they purchased a Corsair, a brand new 880, rolled right off the production line, and they sailed it to Victoria. And by the time they got to Victoria, their pedal drive had broken. They had delaminated a bulkhead.
Oh, wow.
They were, and further up the course, their rudder cassette was breaking apart, and they put it back together with ratchet straps. And finally, they bowed out of the race somewhere north of Vancouver Island. But it was fun to see world-class racers down there. To fix their bulkhead problem, they went down to a local hardware store and bought a bunch of metal rulers and epoxied those because they didn't have any other things at their disposal.
Goodness.
Yeah.
So technology. So if the question's technology, it's MacGyver technology. It's not. There are teams who are trying to.
It's not cutting edge technology.
It's not cutting edge, but it's improvisational.
It's
technology.
know-how. Like these people that know how to use whatever is available to them probably have a significant advantage.
Totally.
Have you been contacted by any of the production builders of trimarans or whatever, and to say, we're building a boat specifically to take on R2AK?
None of the big ones. None of the big ones. We have some small manufacturers who want to put smaller cruising dinghy type boats in the race, but no one like Benetou's reaching out to us or anything.
Have there been any unlikely? Let's see. There's been started in 2015, so there's been 7 races? COVID derailed a couple of them.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Have there been any unlikely winners? Like, we never thought that you would finish, let alone win, because of the craft, maybe.
Winners, the winners are all pretty handy folks.
Right. You don't win by luck.
On accident. Yeah, you don't win on accident.
Yeah.
Well, I think the surprise has kind of been Jean Gusev's teams twice. She has won as captain. That was Team Sail Like a Girl. And then this last year came back on Grey Wolf, We Break for Whales. And both of those boats, like, a lot of people thought, you're never going to have a monohull win this race.
Mm-hmm.
But because the conditions are what they are and the obstacles are what they are, you never know.
You never know.
So it surprised a lot of people. But and so I'm, the person that was most surprising last year to me and caused a stir was Eric Pesty. Now, Eric Pesty was on a Corsair by himself.
Oh.
And he came in, oh God, I can't remember what place he came in. But that guy sailed with, oh boy, did he finish.
Yeah.
He finished pretty early. And I mean, he was soloing. He was sleeping aboard in 20-minute stretches in the middle of populated areas, in the middle where there's land masses. But he was an incredible sailor. And if all the stars align correctly, I could see one day someone like Pesty blown by everybody else. I don't know.
Yeah.
I keep the hope open, at least.
That is incredible.
So we're talking about, people winning the race, and that's seriously not the goal of creating the race.
Well, I read that like most of the interesting stories come not from the winners,
right,
but the other boats that are out there.
Yeah. The stories are amazing, and if we talk about winning, sure,
there's something.
$10,000 feels like winning.
Sure.
And
steak knives feels like winning.
Describe how the winner receives.
Sure, that's cash. We
it's not nailed to a tree anymore, right?
It's nailed to a piece of firewood these days.
Yes.
Up at the Alaska Fish House, who are sponsors of ours. They're also Baranoff Fishing Excursions and the Alaska Fish House are one organization, and they sponsor our finish line. That's where all the boats get to at the very end, and then we throw the awards ceremony for the $10,000. We take as big a nail as we can find, and we bash it through a bunch of Benjamins, and nail it to a piece of wood. And it is apparently pretty difficult without cutting the head off the nail. It's difficult to get the nail out without ruining the money.
Extra challenge to the. That's hilarious.
Yeah, but so that's one way winning. You can be up in Ketchikan trying to pry a nail out of a piece of wood, or you can finish, or you can not finish and still be a winner, like Team Dog Smile, who named their movie Success, or like Doug Smith on Dark Star. You know, his story, I just always love. He and his wife of 35 years, they had spent their relationship together sailing the Inside Passage together.
Wow.
And she passed away a few years ago. And Doug didn't know what to do with himself.
Yeah.
At least this is what he told me. And so he decided to build a boat. And he did. And he entered it in Race to Alaska. And he started sailing north. And he got up by Desolation Sound, and he just hung a right. And he just like Moitessier'd his way out of the race and into who knows what. But I really feel like he won his race.
Yeah.
Because he accomplished whatever it was he was going out there to do. He did it.
He won in life.
Yeah,
which is much more important. So
this episode of the Boat Geeks is sponsored by The Boater's Guide, a free app for Pacific Northwest boaters. The Boater's Guide is adventure and information right at your fingertips, right when you need it. Find your happy place with The Boater's Guide, a free download on your phone or tablet in the App Store and Google Play.
Yeah, we had a couple of guys last year, Team Toy Box Express, and those two guys, they had met the previous year, fallen in love, and they were celebrating their 1-year anniversary by racing to Alaska. And they did not break up by the time they got to Ketchikan.
That's significant.
Although we do have it in our minds that I think there are around 5 divorces due to Race to Alaska. I think is
well. I mean, that's a natural with. I mean, that can happen just
it's
coming into dock at a marina
on many levels.
Yeah, right. Well, I think it's really the impact of the experience on the participants can be life-changing, and sometimes when you have a life-changing experience, some other parts of your life don't seem to make sense anymore.
And again, to bring that into a reality, I would suggest people watch any of the documentaries that are out there, so you can see really how life-changing it is, how intense it is. I'm really interested in that last little run when they're coming to the finish line. Have there been any memorable moments? Have there ever been anything that's considered neck to neck, like just coming in to the finish line? Is it, or experiences that the winners have shared maybe? Where when it's all in sight and finally it's over and they realize they've won. Any experiences you can relay there?
The thing that pops into my mind, again, as a race boss who hasn't seen it all, in 2022, there was a race at the end of the race between Team Elsewhere and Team Fashionably Late aboard.
Two perfect names for a final race.
And Fashionably Late, we're racing aboard my favorite boat name ever. On their dash is called Fighting Trousers. Love it. So Elsewhere and Fighting Trousers, they got themselves into a battle. Elsewhere had gone, it was one of the 3 boats that was on the outside route. Fashionably Late was on the inside route, and they joined up to where it was a race for the steak knives.
Oh man.
And in the end, Elsewhere took it, but there was some time there where they were trading tacks. So those things do happen, even in a long race.
Oh yeah.
After 750 miles. Now it's billed as the longest race of its kind in North America. Are there any around the world?
We say that, but we might have made that up. But we think it's true. We think it's true.
Somebody needs to prove it otherwise.
Are there any races elsewhere in the world that are even somewhat similar, or is this just totally unique?
So it was unique when we made it. I think it's still unique today. But the one race that comes to mind is the Morbihan Challenge in France. Was Fans of the Race to Alaska put that together, and actually then some French folks came back from that to do our race.
Wow.
So there's a bit of a connection there.
Nice.
That's cool.
But these waters are more treacherous. At least I'm going to imagine
I
so.
have no idea.
I don't either.
What I'm told is that they stop every night and go to the pub. So
yeah. Well, I mean,
that could be treacherous too.
If anybody has, sailed or cruised up to Alaska, it is like what Darren read earlier, some of the most beautiful scenery you will ever see if you're into that type of scenery, which I was. It was absolutely breathtaking. I wonder how much of that the participants get to enjoy. I guess with each race, it depends. It could be beautiful weather. It could be treacherous. Yeah. But it really is amazing scenery up here in the Pacific Northwest, and such a great place for a race of this kind. I can't imagine. I wish I could say that someday I'd have, the bravery or the stupidity or whatever it would be in my particular case to do a race like that. But I get to live vicariously through everybody doing the race. What are opportunities for the community to either view the event? There's both the first stage, it starts off at 5 a.m. in Port Townsend, and then high noon, the second stage starts in Victoria. What are the opportunities for people to be there and see the starts of these legs of the race? And then also, are there opportunities for the community to support the event, volunteer, anything like that?
Absolutely. Thanks for giving me opportunity to talk about that.
Yeah, of course.
So first, how can you view it? Obviously, we talked about there's the tracker. There is our whole media team trying to crank out as much coverage as possible, which is difficult, by the way.
So the tracker, just really quickly to interject, are they going to be able to go to R2AK.com?
Yeah, there'll be links.
Okay.
We'll make it clear, especially if you sign up on our newsletter at R2AK.com. You get all the instructions how to be a good fan.
Great.
But if you want to be there in person, there's a ton of opportunities there too. And that really starts with the Race to Alaska Ruckus. Mm-hmm. It's the day before the race starts, which, mind you all, if you are longtime fans, we are changing the weekday that this is happening on. So the race has always started on a Monday, or at least in the last many races has been Monday with the Ruckus on Sunday. This year we're moving it back. The Ruckus will be on Saturday with the start on Sunday.
Okay.
Hoping that that'll be a little more accessible to more people.
Sure.
So yeah, come to the Ruckus. It's going to be at the campus of the Northwest Maritime Center on Saturday, the 8th. Check your calendars to make sure that I didn't say that wrong.
The ever-growing campus of the Maritime Center.
The 8th of
June. Oh,
June.
good.
Yes.
Yeah,
June.
I just take that for granted.
The 8th of some month out there.
8th of June, come down to the Maritime Center, and while you're there, you can meet the racers. You can see their boats.
Great.
And it's a party.
Yeah.
There'll be a beer garden if you love a beer garden.
That sounds like fun.
And then the very next morning at 5 a.m., I know it's early, but we think it's funny.
Yeah.
So come down to the beach. Come down to the newly rebuilt Port Townsend South Jetty.
Yes.
Which
looks great.
If all plans go correctly, they're going to rebuild the walkway out onto there, so you can. You can be one of the first to be out there on the jetty that morning and watch the race start. It's a great time. It's in that twilight hour of the morning. You're going to have 40 something boats out there, hopefully just tacking around waiting for that start, and then they're off. A lot of people will then jump in their car and try to find some vantage point further up further around the coast. You go out to North Beach and Port Townsend.
Yep, of course.
You can watch them, or you can hop in your own boat and follow them along the way. You can then get yourself across the Victoria and come on down to the Greater Victoria Harbor Authority Causeway docks and be there for the boats to come in. You can be with the race for the first 4 days of the thing.
That's fun.
We also, after they're in on that, I guess Monday afternoon at 5 o'clock is the cutoff for them to arrive, and then Monday evening we throw the second skippers meeting and then open to the public, just party over at Swan Pub in Victoria. If you know Victoria, it's over by the Johnson Street Bridge. It's just be a good old time. The next day on Tuesday from noon to 6 is an open boat where you can again go down, see the racers, help them fix their broken boat. I mean, that sounds like support, actually. But if you're willing to help any racer, then we won't call them out for it. And then on the 12th, the Wednesday, the 12th of June at high noon is the second start.
High noon.
Tea
time at the Empress, and also launch of the race. And
Gary Cooper time.
Yes, exactly. And so this is the start of the second leg. what did you call it? So it's basically like everybody's sprinting to their boat.
Le Mans start. You gotta start on your feet, run down to your boat.
I love that.
But it doesn't stop there. I would invite people to come to Ketchikan. Okay. This is something that we have never put as much energy as perhaps we should have to try to get people understanding that come to Ketchikan.
Yeah.
Stand on the dock when that first team arrives. Stand on the dock when the 30th team arrives.
Oh, yeah.
You know, get down there. Eat the amazing fish and chips at the Alaska Fish House.
I can only imagine.
And it's pretty easy to get to Ketchikan, especially if you live in the Pacific Northwest. A flight from SeaTac up to Ketchikan, it's like a 90-minute flight. Flies 5 times a day.
And again, so beautiful. If you haven't been up there, it is so worthwhile to see that part of the country. And it just adds, I would imagine, the drama at the end of that race, just people, they made it. You know, it's got to be electrifying.
So that's spectators watching the race, but
volunteers.
You have an army.
We have a giant army of volunteers.
Yeah.
Like Race to Alaska can't happen. 7048 can't happen. The Wooden Boat Festival can't happen. The Maritime Center can't happen without volunteers.
So how do people get involved with you guys?
Oh yeah, please do. Oh my gosh. I'm drooling for the volunteers. Not just because we need you, but because I love working with all the people who come out of the woodwork to support this thing. So there are a lot of ways you can get involved with Race to Alaska and 7048, which I'll plug a little bit too, as support. So the ruckus, we need people on the ground to station all the different things we do with the Race to Alaska ruckus. For 7048, look that up at 7048.com. We need people at the start line. We need people at the finish line for a full 36 hours. We need a lot of folks for that. There's also safety teams. Now, I put together teams who are doing inspections. We inspect every boat just to make sure that they are carrying Coast Guard required gear. To ensure that. So if you think you have at least enough know-how or can at least get through the CFRs well enough to understand the basic requirements of a broad range of vessel types, then you can reach out. We also need people to help train racers on how to use their GPS devices. We're looking for people who have special talents in kind of event crisis management, because we do stand up a war room, we call it, which is our command center for the race start. I don't say crisis management to say that it's always a crisis, but people who can be on my team as we're watching that race start and responding to any incidents. So people who can chart effectively, people who know how to use good VHF radio etiquette. But the biggest thing that we could use, if your listeners have big hearts and, I'll say it, big wallets, is not necessarily just monetary donations, but if you have a boat, if you have a vessel, and you want to go be a part of Race to Alaska on the water, we're always looking for people who want to be part of our media team. Because the Maritime Center, as much as we are on the water all the time, we don't own the types of vessels that can go up the race course. And we also don't have the ability always to pay for that much gas, honestly. So all of the footage that you've seen over the last, 8 years of Race to Alaska, it's largely on the back of volunteer vessels. So if you have something that can make pretty good speed, let's call it a 7 knots or better, especially if you have...
That's our kind of speed.
We're sitting on a boat right now.
Yeah.
Especially if you've got a dinghy you can drop in to get low angle shots.
Yep.
Our whole game is that we put together a media team, and then we try to just get them to where the action is. It's a fast paced, ever changing scene of how we make it happen. And then I'll also say, if you have experience in videography, in editing, if you're a good interviewer, if you are either professional or amateur at those levels, we might have a spot for you. We do have a paid media team for professionals. And if you're looking for your next gig and you feel like you understand the vibe of Race to Alaska, we'll be putting out a call for those positions. But in addition to that, we have more, I wouldn't say, maybe intern or kind of learning positions. There's a lot of ways to get involved. And to do that, you just go to Race to Alaska, R2AK.com. And just navigate in one of our menus. You'll eventually come upon the volunteer link. And a lot of that's not live at the moment. It will be very soon, or I'll do it. I'm going to give him my email address.
Do it.
You're brave enough. You're a brave
man. It's going to come in. That and my social security number. It's raceboss@r2ak.com.
All right,
if you want to get involved, just email me straight up. Raceboss@r2ak.com. Always looking for a few good people, or like many good people.
So that's spectators, that's volunteers. You've got your team.
Mm-hmm. If you have a boat, I love that idea.
You need entries.
Yeah,
we need entries.
How is that going so far?
We need entries. So we opened up applications November 15th, which was another small change of the race this year. We gave ourselves a little more time to get our ducks in a row before opening applications. Mm-hmm. At the moment, we have 12 applications, which may sound small, but at this point, that we're right on track for a good race.
I assume it'll snowball and more will come in. Before we wrap it up in regards to Race Alaska, do you want to tell us a little bit, just briefly, about 7048 and as well as the cruise that you were talking about, where you're the cruise boss?
Yeah, so 7048 originally was billed as the spawn of Race to Alaska. Mm-hmm. It started in 2018, and it's a paddling race, or I shouldn't just say paddling. It's a human-powered race, mm-hmm. muscles only. Mm-hmm. So no sailing,
no sails, no
engines, no support. And it goes from the Theophos Waterway in Tacoma to Port Townsend. That's 70 miles, 48 hours, 7048. Very clever name, I know.
Yeah.
It is.
And so we start that race at 7 p.m.
Yeah.
Because we think it's funny.
Yeah.
And
I love how that's the answer for so many things.
The vibe.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it gets dark. So they launch off and they hit Colvos Passage and it gets dark.
Again, something I'm never going to participate in probably, but
but it too, I mean, it is a real deal race.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
That one we have quite a few more entries because it is more accessible, mm-hmm. And there is just generally a larger pool of human power boaters.
That's awesome.
And that one again, it's also open to any type of human power. So we have kayaks and outrigger canoes, and we have this one guy who every year comes with this thing he calls the boogie barge, which is a 4-person pedal station with 2 holes that he comes. There's people putting together all sorts of crazy boats, but they've got those 48 hours to get to the end, and there's a lot to contend with in that one as well.
Wow.
There's a lot of currents running around there, but there's also a ton of vessel traffic.
Ton of boats.
Yep. You got to cross all of the vessel or all the ferry lanes, over by once you get north of Colvos, you're starting to hit all sorts of lanes. You're crossing the mouth of Eagle Harbor, you're crossing the Kingston Ferry, you're getting up to Point No Point in Hansville where things get a little rough. And also those cargo ship wakes can crest at 6 feet over by there. So
you're doing a little surfing.
Yeah, definitely doing some surfing, which is good for the surf skis and bad for everybody else.
And then there's the cruise.
What is the cruise?
Salish 100.
Salish 100. Salish 100 is the event where I have to really turn down the volume on my race bossery, where my answer to everything is figure it out yourself.
Nice.
But I've come really to love this event. For the first time, I was able to be with the event the whole time this last year, and it is a moving community of like-minded people in boats 22 feet or less, going from Olympia to Port Townsend, with designated stops each night. But it's loose. It's not, you must do this, you have to leave at a certain time. There's a loose confederacy of support boats who are there really to augment the Good Samaritans on the water. They're not there with any specific mandate to be with everyone at the time, but we're all within radio contact. There are phone lists distributed, so it's a front country event. And
are there any limitations on the vessels?
It's just 22 feet and under.
Okay, but powered as well?
Doesn't matter. Yeah, powered. Yeah, you'd be powered. In fact, we hope you're powered in some way.
Yeah.
So you can keep up.
Mm-hmm.
But we also had someone doing it on a stand-up paddleboard last year.
Mm-hmm. There's always got to be that person.
Always got to be someone on a stand-up paddleboard. And we're hoping that she's going to bring a whole army more
That's awesome.
Stand-up paddleboarders next year. Great. And it really is open to everybody. We make connections with people up and down the Puget Sound. There are some people who live in Henderson Inlet, just east of Bud Inlet, Olympia, which is the first night stop. And there's no amenities there. So we've linked up with a bunch of people who live on shore,
Waterfront,
and
yeah.
they threw us a seafood
Again, the community,
meal.
the boating community.
The boating community, they come together.
Yeah.
And we link up with the Gig Harbor Boat Shop in Gig Harbor. They throw a barbecue.
That's great.
Yeah, just lots of great connections. And I think in the years to come, there's a lot of opportunity for expansion. So
sounds like you have a fun job.
It's well, it's a lot of spreadsheets.
Not too shabby.
But,
yeah.
but it's also, every once in a while I get to go out on the water and I get to talk to some amazing people and connect. Yeah.
Cool.
That's awesome. Well, in closing, just so everybody has the information necessary if they're interested in any of these events. Now, these are all with the Northwest Maritime Center, correct? All of them? Okay. Yeah. So for the Race to Alaska, applications did open November 15th and they close, just for fun, I'm assuming, tax day, April 15th.
Mm-hmm.
Stage 1 begins on Sunday, June 9th at 5 a.m. in Port Townsend, Washington. Stage 2 begins on Wednesday, June 12th at high noon in Victoria, British Columbia. And we strongly encourage everybody to participate if you can. Be there and get some of that energy and excitement that the Race to Alaska creates. Now, the websites, if you want more information, R2AK.com. As well as if you want to see that movie, totally recommend it. Darren and I both do. R2AKthemovie.com. You can watch the trailer there and get a bunch of info. And then also for the Maritime Center, it is nwmaritime.org, so northwestmaritime.org. Is there anything else you'd like to plug, or websites or email addresses, your Social Security? Now's the time to drop it.
I heard a rumor that you're going to be doing a podcast.
Yes.
Your own podcast.
Was this a rumor I gave you
half
an hour ago?
Yeah, we talked about it.
That is true. Now, you say this episode's going to be dropping sometime in the new year.
Yes.
And I expect our first episode to come out sometime early in the new year as well, maybe before this or after.
Nice.
There is an existing Race to Alaska podcast that was done for a couple of years and it went dormant. This year, we're going to be interviewing all the racers.
Oh, that's
so
great.
If you want to get to know the racers in their own voices with their own answers, then tune in on all the places you might find a podcast.
Yeah.
If I can figure out how to make that happen.
Oh.
So
I think you will. And I think that those guests are going to be extremely interesting to hear from, because it takes a very unique individual or team to do this race, and I would imagine they have amazing personalities and stories.
Their stories are incredible. I did my first interview yesterday, and I am fired up to talk to more of them.
Awesome.
So now people can listen to this podcast by going to r2ak.com.
Yep.
Eventually.
Yep. And follow us on the social medias, because every time we put an episode out, we'll put it up there as well.
Okay. Which you can get those links on the website as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But now, in terms of the race itself and entries, I do have something to leave people with that.
Excellent.
I think this is going to help.
Okay.
Do it for glory. Do it to escape creditors. Do it because you feel compelled to punish yourself. We don't care. We'll love you anyway. I love it.
Perfect. All right, Jesse, thank you.
Thank you.